Morning, everyone. The reason I want to talk about the potential for defection again. Now, bear in mind, we don't know that there'll be any more defections. Labour is saying, "Oh yeah, we've got some more defections." We had news reports at the weekend that there might be multiple defections. There might be a defection to Labour, the Lib Dems, and Reform UK. Who knows? It could be an absolute yard sale from the Conservatives. And even the Conservatives are expecting it. They're trying to ramp up. They're using the story at the weekend with the Robert Buckland, Natalie Elphicke thing as a way of threatening other Tory MPs, basically saying, yeah, we're going to throw the kitchen sink at you if you leave. But the reason why I bring it up this now, it's not just because it's purely speculative. There was a vote in Parliament last night. Some of you may be aware. And what it was to effectively, because there's been a lot of particularly sexual violence from MPs in recent years, and even convictions. It's been deemed ridiculous that an MP should be allowed to wander the parliamentary estate if they're being investigated for serious offences like this. And so there was moves to say if an MP is charged with a crime like this, that they be banned from the parliamentary estate. And Labour said, hang on a minute, that's not quite good. Why not when they're arrested? So there was a vote last night, and it was a free vote, by the way. If the Tories had have whipped on this matter, obviously the Tories would have won. But it was a free vote, so people could vote as they wished. And Labour won. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting. Let me just stick up, just so you can see there. Labour won 170 votes to 169. So it won by one vote. One vote. If one of the people voting in favour of Labour had not, it would have failed. So there's a couple of interesting points there. The first interesting point is that Natalie Elphicke, of course, voted for Labour because she's now a Labour MP. So although when I said last week, I said, one benefit at the very least is she is now going to be voting with Labour. And I said, but there aren't really many votes coming up. Well, this was quite a big one, and she's clearly swung that one. But also, there were other still existing Conservative MPs who voted with Labour. It's not technically breaking the whip because there was no whip involved. It was a free vote. But nonetheless, what have we got here? 8 Tory MPs voted with Labour when basically all the opposition was almost exclusively from the Conservatives. There was a Lib Dem that voted against it and a couple of others. But mostly the opposition was basically the Conservatives. It was like 166 Conservatives voted against it. Technically, that'll be 168, I guess, because there'll be the tellers as well who aren't really counted in that. And they were Conservatives as well. And so people are now starting to think, well, realistic, if there is another defection in the works for Labour, it would be remarkable if that defector voted against a Labour amendment at this point. So should we start to look at the people here? Now, there were loads and loads of people who didn't vote at all. They either weren't in Parliament. It was a Monday night. Not all MPs are around at the time, unless, the whip, there's a 3-line whip for something. Or it could just be that they couldn't be bothered or they didn't want to say one way or the other. So like one of the people I'm wondering if could be a defection target. I'm not sure if he would be, but if you think about the sort of ones that would be more welcome in Labour, like Alex Sharma with his green credentials, that would be a possibility. That would be a possibility. But you could also look at the 8 Tory MPs who just voted with Labour last night. So I'm just going to quickly go down them just to sort of say what would be, whether they'd be realistic or not. So one was Elliot Colburn. Now, he backs Penny Mordaunt in both. It's not particularly remarkable, by the way, this guy. I've not really found much on him. Obviously, all I've done, some of these I knew, some of them I didn't really know. So it's obviously quick Wikipedia searches for those I didn't really know much about. Elliot Colburn's not particularly remarkable. He did back Penny Mordaunt in both leadership contests, which might suggest that, you know, he wanted to take it relatively seriously, that he didn't believe Rishi Sunak was in the best interest of anyone, and that Liz Truss obviously was mad as a badger. One thing I would point out about Elliot Colburn, though, the only thing against him, it's not quite a guilt by association, but probably a reason why he wouldn't. His partner, he's gay, his partner is Kevin Edger, who, for those who don't know, is an extremely obnoxious right-wing commentator. When I say obnoxious, that's maybe rude. Should we say forthright? So it would be very, very weird if this guy joined Labour. So I strongly suspect, probably not. The next one that voted with Labour was Theresa May. I don't think so. The next one that voted with Labour was Justin Tomlinson. Now, I suspect not, because... So, I mean, there were certain advantages, strategic advantages to accepting Natalie Elphicke. But let's be clear, you know, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't really accept someone like that. Various, not only things she's done, but various character traits just don't really fit. So I don't think Labour could get away with another one. There were a lot of advantages to Natalie Elphicke. There are no... Justin Tomlinson has had a dodgy past. For example, he leaked, this is years ago, but still, he leaked some parliamentary documents to Wonga, which is like a payday loan company, or was it? Is it still about? I don't even know if it's still about, but it used to be quite pervasive. And he was found in contempt of Parliament for doing that. So basically has tried to, presumably they were paying him, tried to abuse his position as an MP to help out a payday loan company. You could argue these days that, you know, he should have been forced to resign for this, but he wasn't. He's still an MP now. He's also been accused of bullying CCHQ staff. So basically, I don't see that he's got any great skills that would be a benefit to Labour. And again, his inclusion in Labour would not be welcomed. And I don't think it wouldn't be worth it. So I don't think Justin Tomlinson. Next one would be Laura Farris. I can't find a great deal on her. Oh, David's just saying there, Wonga was regulated into bankruptcy. I thought it had disappeared. Laura Farris, I can't find anything massively remarkable about her. She's a One Nation Tory, so fairly moderate. She's on the Standards and Privileges Committee, so she's obviously fairly well regarded. But she does... Well, the only thing I can find about her in terms of her own personal views on policy is about fire and rehire. So her views as far as Wikipedia is concerned is she thinks that fire and rehire rules need tightening up. She thinks that a lot of companies take the piss with it, but she does think that it should remain as a sort of last resort. So she is in favour of fire and rehire to a certain extent. So again, I can't find any evidence that she would be particularly useful to Labour. So I think probably not. Jason McCartney is really interesting, but probably more likely to defect to the Lib Dems than Labour, maybe. He used to be a Lib Dem. He stood for Parliament as a Lib Dem, but he didn't win. He, as a Conservative MP in the early days of the coalition, voted against the whip, voted against a rise in tuition fees. He once, this is actually really interesting from Wikipedia, he once, a constituent was sort of saying, I don't agree with the policy on this, that, and the other, and stuff like that. And Jason McCartney actually replied back to the constituent to advise him to vote for the Green Party. Not in a nasty way either. It wasn't in a like, oh, piss off and vote for the Greens then. It was like in a constructive way, as in, you know, the only candidate standing in this constituency that supports this view is the Green Party candidate. So, you know, that's quite an interesting position to take. He also was one of the few MPs in 2020 when Boris Johnson was trying, because, you know, we had this thing, obviously the pandemic, there was a lot of concern for people in poverty being sort of isolated. And there were moves to make sure that free school meals would continue through the summer, which they eventually were. But Boris Johnson didn't want this. and there was a vote on it. And Jason McCartney was one of the Tory MPs who voted against the whip on this. He said no. He supported Labour, basically, Labour's amendment to have the free school meals continue, which, as I say, they eventually did. And that was as the result of a lot of Tory MPs' pressure. But this was one who just straight away was going, yeah, we're not having this. So he'd be, I don't think anyone, I can't find anything particularly objectionable other than he's a Tory MP and has voted in favour of a lot of terrible things in the last few years. But as Tory MPs go, he'd probably be as welcome as any other, just for things like that. But as I say, because he was a Lib Dem in the past, it may be that he would actually go to the Lib Dems this time. Next one will be Theresa Villiers. No. I mean, you could just say Theresa Villiers straight away. No. But she, particularly at the moment, so when we talk about Natalie Elphicke trying to subvert the course of justice to intervene in her husband's trial a few years ago, she was not the only Tory MP that was found to have breached standards in doing so. There were several other Tory MPs who were in on the act, and Theresa Villiers was one of them. So, yeah, I don't think Theresa Villiers would ever want to join Labour. And if she did, I mean, yeah, that wouldn't happen. The next one would be Luke Hall. Really nothing remarkable about this man, but I think he's a deputy leader of the Conservative Party, so I don't see it. Again, I don't see that he brings anything. That I can't find anything about him. And then the last one is Caroline Noakes. Oh, sorry, Peter Turner's just come up with another one for Laura Farris. She's the MP who defended Harriet Harman from the Tory attacks on her by the when she was the Standards Committee thing over Boris Johnson. Okay, that's interesting. But Caroline Noakes, out of all of them, would probably be the one that I think a lot of people in Labour would pick. She's very liberal. I mean, she is sort of right-wing economically, but she's very liberal socially, huge supporters of people's rights. She's a trans ally. She opposed Brexit, and she opposed hard Brexits. She actually lost the whip when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister in 2019 for voting against a no-deal Brexit. She's called for GB News to be closed down. And she's also actually opposed certain developments in the Tees Valley area due to lack of environmental considerations. So there's quite a few things, you know, that basically I don't think Caroline Noakes would be, if you're going to accept that there might be at least one more Tory MP join Labour, Caroline Noakes would probably be in people's bucket of, yeah, all right then. Jeannie's saying, a double defector in third party, has that ever been done before? I don't know, in all honesty. At some point, if this actually, do you know what? If we end up having another couple of defections anywhere, it doesn't matter where, it might be worth me trawling through history to find precedents for this, because it's all really remarkable. But there we go. But there isn't, I mean, as I say, it's not just that if there is another, and we don't know that there is another defection coming. Labour are saying that there is. The Conservatives are worried that there is. It doesn't mean it is. It could be just Labour playing silly buggers. You know, like Richard Tice, he tried to claim he's been in talks with 9 people, 9 Tory MPs. He hasn't got any of them. Like Lee Anderson wasn't a Tory MP when he went to Reform UK. He'd already been binned by the Tories. And given that he wouldn't apologise, was probably not going to be taken back. So, you know, Richard Tice was probably, let's be honest, lying, in all honesty. He might have had talks with a couple, but, you know, I mean, what can he... Anyway. But we'll just have to have a look here. We'll have to see what happens. But it is worth noting that there were plenty of Tory MPs who didn't vote either way that could have done. You know, plenty of backbenchers, including Alex Sharma. I'm just going to have a quick look at a few others. I'm particularly looking for Tobias Elwood. I can't actually see him. Does that mean he voted against it? In which case, we could probably count him out. I would imagine. Yeah, Tobias Elwood voted against this amendment. So I would, given that this is probably, unless I'm missing something else, I mean, surely that vote last night was Labour's last chance in opposition to actually win a thing, because there's not very much going on in Parliament. I would argue that any Conservative MP who voted against Labour last night probably would be thought of quite poorly if they suddenly defected to Labour. It'd be like, what? You voted against us on the last thing we could have won, and now you're joining us, piss off. So I strongly suspect that anyone who votes, any of the 169 or 166 Tory MPs, but 168 really, that voted no, you can probably discount. So yeah, Tobias Elwood would have been off this list, I think. I haven't gone down it with a fine-tooth comb. He would be the one I'd go, well, you know, he's very vocally anti-Brexit. Okay. But he has voted, you know, he voted against Labour last night. Not the sort of thing you would do if you were in talks with Labour, I wouldn't have thought. Given that no one would have attracted attention if they'd have just not voted at all. Nobody at all. Loads of people didn't vote. Loads of people. Loads of Tory MPs. Obviously, like members of the front bench, you wouldn't expect them to. But even ones who could have done, just didn't. So there we go. Right, I'll catch up with some comments here. The Tories would have taken Anderson back. They would just have to let it blow over first. Well, that's possible as well. That is possible. But at the same time, when he went to Reform UK, he was not in the Conservative Party, and he was not considered. It wasn't considered imminent. But there we go. The gossip is a minister I've never heard of called Joe Churchill defecting tomorrow. Well, should we have a little look at her then? Because I don't know who that is either. I mean, to be honest, I would ignore all. If there is another defection, I'm going to just add two things. This is my own personal thoughts. First of all, if there's going to be another defection, I'm not sure tomorrow's the best time for it. I would stagger them a bit more. I'd make it next week. Admittedly, unless, of course, Keir Starmer really wants to piss on Rishi Sunak's big week of speeches, but I would say, right, let's have a look. I can't find. Oh, here's her Wikipedia on it. Joe Churchill. She's MP for Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. Never mind that. I can't see much about her. She resigned in 2022 in protest at Boris Johnson's conduct in the Chris Pincher scandal. I mean, that's not. So did a lot of people. I can't really see much about her. And what I would say is, whoever the defector is, I'm sure is under wraps. The number of people who know, it's not in anyone's interest who could know to leak who it is. The rumours are probably related. Like, what I would say is MPs talk to each other, right? In the bars and in the common and you know, House of Commons tea rooms, things like that. They do talk to each other. You know, they attack each other in debating chambers, but they do treat each other with civility most of the times. So you've got some scope there for someone seen in the tea room, like, you know, maybe they see someone from Labour's shadow cabinet talking to a Tory backbencher about, they're just talking about football or something, right? And then they go, oh, are they? So you can, the rumours, there's so many ways in which these rumours could start. You know, I'm ignoring all rumours. I'm not even taking it as read that there will be another defection. There may be, but until it happens. But just if there is, it is interesting. Caroline Noakes, of course, has been a minister as well, because there is a bit of a buzz that it's a former minister. But then so many MPs have been a minister at one point or another. That doesn't really mean anything. It really doesn't mean anything. Wouldn't be surprised to see an SNP MP defecting, especially now with Kate Forbes Deputy First Minister. So you think most likely David Linden and Cancer. I'm not sure. Like, you to go from an independence party, there aren't really many other independence parties. So who would you defect to? You could defect to Alba, but what's the point? They're just mad. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I would see that. And also Kate Forbes. Okay, she's now Deputy First Minister. I mean, she was always senior within the SNP anyway. A front bench would be amazing, but a bit unlikely. It would be very unlikely. No, I don't think. It would be remarkable for it to even be a current, even a junior minister right now defecting. That would set the cat amongst the pigeons, but there we go. You say Count Binface should set up a political party for the general election, right? No. He's setting up a podcast, apparently, though. He's doing a podcast. But there it is. James saying 4 defections, 2 to Labour, 1 to Lib Dems, 1 to Reform. Would much prefer that to happen before PMQs tomorrow instead of it being staggered. No, I mean, I'm a bit wary anyway about defection. I don't like defections in general. But you want to stagger them. You want it to be like, so we had Dan Poulter a couple of weeks, then we had Natalie Elphick. So wait another week. Always do it before PMQs, because I'll tell you what will be hilarious tomorrow. I'm going to try and tune in to PMQs a few minutes before, and I want to watch the Conservative benches because I'll tell you what's going to happen after last week. All the Conservative MPs are going to be scanning the opposition benches for someone they know. That's hilarious. That is hilarious. So I would, I would leave it another week, let them stew, then do it next week. Is there a PMQs next week? Because it's all a bit weird at the moment in terms of when Parliament's on as we run down to summer. I think there's be a PMQs on next week. And then do it then again. And if they're up for it, because the way Natalie Elphick did it, she just went straight to the Labour benches. What would be better is if they physically cross the floor. So they sit down in their usual place. The problem is if it's someone who sits quite far at the back, they'll draw attention by sitting at the front if they don't normally sit there. So you can understand why they wouldn't physically cross the floor. But still do it just before Rishi Sunak's about to enter the chamber. Have Penny Mordaunt shit herself again. And there we go. I would absolutely leave it till next week. I mean, if there is to be a defection tomorrow, maybe that could be a Lib Dem defection or something. I mean, I say, who was that guy? Jason McCartney, did I say? Who was the one who used to be a Lib Dem? Yeah, Jason McCartney. So maybe he defects tomorrow to the Lib Dems, say. There's not a PMQs any week in terms of actually answering questions. Well, he has actually answered a couple of questions, to be fair. I think he did it a couple of weeks ago. It didn't do him any good at all. That was the one where Keir Starmer was pressing him on his plan to scrap national insurance. And which, let's be clear, by the way, completely screws over pensioners. So it'd be, tactically mad for a Tory to do it. But the reason why they'll want to do it is it's not, they'll say, oh, it's to save hardworking people some taxes. No, it's not. It's because national insurance is also paid by employers. Like income tax, you pay your income tax on your income, but there's no employer's contribution to income tax, of course. Excuse me, but there is for national insurance. So it's to get businesses out of having to pay it. That's what it is. It'll be billing it as a way of cutting taxes for workers, but it's cutting taxes for employers. But there's absolutely no way. There's no way you could make it work because you'll screw pensioners over. But anyway, Starmer was pressing him on it, and he said, "Can you rule out cutting the state pension for this?" And Rishi Sunak said, "Yeah, I absolutely ruled that out. We're not doing that." So then Keir Starmer said, So one of your MPs has suggested raising the pension age to 75. Is that how you'll be paying for it? And he wouldn't answer that question. So when you will, and this is the problem in politics, if you're going to rule something out, make sure you've got an answer to the follow-up question. Otherwise, it looks like you're not. So it now looks like they are planning on raising the pension age to 75. I mean, they're not going to be in power long enough to do it, but there we go. Say one problem, Phil hates PMQs. I do hate PMQs. I do videos on my own channel on it most weeks. I didn't last week because the defection was bigger news. I will look for any excuse not to do it. And as soon as Labour in power, I'll stop. And to begin with, there'll not be any point in PMQs anyway, because what's going to happen? Imagine it. First PMQs with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. Even if the Tories don't get obliterated, let's say the Tories are the official opposition party, what are they going to do? What are they going to ask? There's nothing to ask about. So it'll be months before anyone can say anything useful at PMQs, because Keir Starmer, whatever question, the only questions can be, what are you intending to do about this? To which Keir Starmer will just repeat his campaign lines. Until the Labour government has actually put things in place and there's a way of measuring the impact, there's no point in PMQs. I mean, you have to have it. The Prime Minister must be subject to scrutiny. But there'll be no point. So I'll just quietly drop it at that point. Every now and then there'll be a PMQs where something remarkable is said, and that'll be it. But it won't be every week. And the only thing that really happens in PMQs these days is you just get to point out how you get three things happen usually at PMQs. You can get to point out how tetchy Rishi Sunak is when someone's telling him he's talking shit. You can try and point out some lie that he says, like when because I mean, it's utterly ridiculous, the blatant lies that they are telling. And I don't mean like, massaging statistics. That happens all the time, right? I mean, blatant lies, just objective lies. And the third thing is just avoiding answering the questions altogether. That's every week. That's pretty much every week. How like a hyena if it's Ed Davey facing Keir Starmer, that'll be brilliant. It will be brilliant, and it is on. People do need to vote tactically. And I am just going to point out, as we're on that matter as well, when you're looking at the polls and you look at, the Conservatives are going to be wiped out, do try and bear in mind there is very, very good reason to suppose that Reform UK's share of the vote is being amplified in the polls. And I think there are good reasons why. And partly it's because Reform UK's appeal derives entirely from overexposure in the national media, but they don't have any real campaigning infrastructure. Come the general election, Reform UK are not going to be able to convert their national appeal into votes at the ballot box. So the Tories are going to benefit more than polls suggest, which means tactical voting will absolutely be essential to make that happen. And I think that's what a lot of people who are prepared to tactically vote should think. Don't think in terms of tactically voting to get rid of the Conservative government. I think, we can be satisfied that is going. Think about it as a way of getting rid of the Conservatives as a concept. Oh, super chat. Thank you very much. Right at the end. Oh my God, what is this? Anterinum Valentinium. I don't. My Latin's no good. Trying to calm myself down before biochem. My biochem final this afternoon. Not sure politics is my best plan. Oh no, things that take your mind off it. I will just tell you as a teacher, if you've got an exam this afternoon, you want for your lunch things to avoid: bad fats and sugar, refined sugar. Terrible. Don't have them. Good things: slow release carbohydrates and protein. So like, chicken pasta or something like that. And obviously make sure you take plenty of water. But sip after every question to calm you down before each question. But that is my final advice there as a former teacher. But there we go. I just thought we'd have a little go there because that vote last night, very interesting in terms of if there is a defection, who would it be? I don't think it would be someone who voted against Labour last night. That vote came down to one vote. Anyone who voted against Labour last night, I don't think is interested in joining Labour. What do you think? The other thing to note, and also they'll get extra shit if they did after doing that. And the other, so yeah, I think we'd particularly look at the people who voted with Labour, but we also have to bear in mind it could just have been someone who simply didn't oppose it as well. That would also be possible. And another super chat right at the end there, Johnny Copperhead, £5 super chat. Thank you very much. Question: is Elphick a member of the Labour Party now? I would assume so. It's quite tricky to be a Labour MP without being a Labour member, so I imagine so. Yes. And as I say, you know, despite all the criticism, which is reasonable criticism, it's already resulted in Labour winning a vote, and it's an important vote as well for defending against, you know, sexual predators. This vote literally means if an MP, or it should mean, it's an amendment, right? I don't, you know, I don't know what the process is at this point because I hadn't really been paying enough attention to it because I just assumed it would fail, right? And it hasn't. So I'm going to have to find out more about it now. But the implication of this is that Parliament is saying that if an MP is even arrested for an offence like this, sexual assault, they should be suspended from the parliamentary estate at that point. Doesn't wait until there's a charge. At the point of arrest, that's enough to trigger it. So that's quite important. But there we go anyway. We've come to the end there. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel, of course. Have a great day. It's a little bit more rainy today, or it is where I am anyway. But have a good day, and until next time, I'll see you later.